If you could lock in 5% interest growth on your investments, would you do it? Would you lock in 5% right now? Maybe even more. And if you did decide, yeah, that's a pretty decent rate, I like that. How long would you lock it in for? Would you go for 2 years? 5 years? 10 years? Would you lock it in for the rest of your life? That's the question. That's the question we're going to talk about today, Tony. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
5%. Would you take it?
Yes.
All right. So that concludes our show. Thanks. I hope
I
everyone has a good
didn't
week.
mean to be so such finality there, but for sure, because I think the rates are coming down for, especially if you're talking about short-term investments or principal protected investments like CDs, MYGAs, fixed index annuities, those types of things.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
those are directly affected, but those are the most immediately affected when the Fed lowers interest rates. They've lowered them, and they say they're going to lower them again yet this year, or probably. So, yeah, I'd lock in.
Yes, September 17th of 25, the Federal Reserve cut by 0.25%. And you're right. The chatter is more to come. More cuts to come. You got Trump over here saying, cut, get rid of them, you know.
Yeah, there's political pressure, but the Fed says it's not bowing to that. It's doing this because of the economy and because of jobs numbers, and they're looking down the road at what could happen.
So the question becomes, all right, 5% sounds good. And I'm looking right now. I have software that shows me rates. And I'm looking at multi-year guarantee annuities, MYGAs, not CDs. Money markets. I have people in money market. I have clients in CDs. And you can't get 5% for much long. You know, maybe
No,
I give you for
MYGA
3
is
months.
like a CD, but you can usually get higher rates.
And we've done shows on it. I'll put them
Yep.
up here for those that are watching multi-year guarantee annuities. In a nutshell, it's with an insurance company, not a bank, and they give you a set interest rate for a set amount of time. That's kind of in a nutshell. So the question is, how long, Tony? If someone said to you, "Hey, Tony, I'll give you 5.75%," how long would you lock that in for?
As long as possible. If they said I could lock it in for 2 years, I'd do it.
What if they said I can lock it in for 10 years, which you can, by the way? That's available right now. I'm looking at the list. There's at least 10 companies.
Well, it depends on when I needed the money.
So that is the question. When do you need the money?
Everybody's situation is different, so that might not be good for some of our listeners, but it might be perfect for others, right? Am I right?
You're right. What if you're planning to retire at 60 and you're 55? You know, you think annuities, it's the A word, right? 4-letter word, but locking in 5%, and like I said, you can get 5.5, 5.75. There's plenty of companies that are above. You can get above 5 right now, and then with this, right now meaning the end of September 2025. That may not last long, so you might feel, I need to lock it in.
Yeah.
But it's not, so the question is, do you lock in for a spending bucket? We've done the show on the buckets, right? There's a hole in my bucket. Do you put some in for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Would you lock in 10 years for 5.75?
I think 5 would be my limit.
Why?
Because interest rates, if inflation rears its ugly head, they might have to raise the rates again.
Do you see a world where you will see interest rates for a MYGA offering 7% interest? And you're like, damn, I locked in at 5.75. I wish I didn't do it. Is that what you're saying?
I think there's an outside chance. I don't think it's likely, but yeah.
That is a possibility. And so what do you do? I had, when I first started years ago, I remember actually when I was in college, I think I remember getting 5% on my checking account, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that went to 0 for quite a while.
Yeah.
And when I was helping people with financial planning, they would say to me things like, hey, if you can get me 4%, I'll give you all my money. Right? Give it all.
Right.
Take it all. Because they're getting effectively 0.4% everywhere else.
Yeah.
CDs were paying 2%, 1%.
And some
So now
under
we're here,
1%.
right? Under one. So now we're in a spot where you can get 5+%. And people are starting to say, well, maybe. And I used to think back in the day, why would you ever lock in something for 10 years? That's just crazy. In fact, there's a term for it. I come originally old school. I got first involved in financial services as a broker, um, actually like a telemarketer type, you see on the movies. This is when stocks were traded in fractions, not decimals.
Yeah.
And the term was annuicide. That client or that person's committing annuicide. And what that meant was they're taking money out of the stock market and putting it into annuity. And therefore, they've committed annuicide to you as the broker because you can no longer charge a fee or make trade volume on that money because it's now an annuity and it's done.
And the
And we
argument
didn't
was
like that.
also they called it a annuicide because they were saying these people shouldn't be doing this because they can earn more in the market, and they've committed annuicide because they're locking in this low return for a long period of time rather than letting it ride in the stock market where you could, they assume, always make more, but that's not necessarily true. So, but
Yeah.
but
And
Dan, I challenge this theory a little bit because when we talk about CDs and MIGAs and fixed index annuities, principal protected items, and you talk about locking in for 10 years, the majority of the people you work with or that I've seen that would need a MIGA or a CD, a lot of these people, the only reason you wouldn't let your money ride in the market or need this is because, well, maybe you have a low risk tolerance, but also you're getting older or you're in retirement and you need those quote unquote guaranteed returns, or a steady return that will be there. So that's the product you use. And if you are older, you're 70 years old, you're in retirement, you're 75, locking in for 10 years, locking up money that you can't access for 10 years, I think most wouldn't want to or probably shouldn't do that, wouldn't you say?
maybe. And you're right. I think 10 years is a long time when you're 75 or 80.
Yeah.
But but what if you're 55?
Yeah. Then it
Oh
makes
my God,
sense.
why would I lock it in? I got so many more years I
Oh,
can. So so what you do, well, let's just take an example. Let's say, Tony, you're 55 and you're
okay.
retiring at 65.
Okay.
So in 10 years you're going to not have any more income per se, and you're going to delay Social Security 70. So you need $50,000 that year to augment your income. What if you put 30,000 away at 5% interest? That would be in 10 years, that would be about 50,000,
Yeah.
right? And then
So
you don't have to think
then it
about it.
makes
And then
sense. Yeah.
at that point, boom, here it is, there's your money. What that does is a couple of things. It takes some pressure off of the fear of what's going to happen to your money. It protects against sequence of returns risk. We've done shows on that.
Yeah.
That's where you go to retire and all of a sudden, boom, the market crashes, all your money in the market, and now you have 30% less than you started with just because the market went down. In this case, if you put money in a bucket for 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, whenever you need it, it's there and you have that guarantee. So you're right. As you get older, you don't want to necessarily go out that long unless you don't need the money. But
Right.
if you don't need the money, why wouldn't you just put it in the market and get the historical 8% return? So what I see happening, and I was going to get to this later, but I'm just going to skip to it now. What happens is people, as they get older, have a rising glide path, which is just a fancy word for saying the amount that they have at risk versus safety increases as they get older, which is very counterintuitive
Yeah.
because they're no longer needing those fixed rates and those short-term buckets because they have their income already steady. They've used this approach to have short-term buckets coming due. Now they're 80. Do they really need a short-term bucket? Well, yeah, they might have some, but they may have been sitting on a stock portfolio that was, well, let's take a step back. Let's say you have $1 million, Tony,
Mm-hmm.
and you're 60, and you need $50,000 to live. What if you took all million and bought 5% interest? Everyone talks about the 4% rule. Take 4%, you'll never run out. Well, here we go, guaranteed 5%. Why wouldn't you take that? Why wouldn't you put all million into the 5%, and now you got your 50,000? 10 years from now, you still got your million or more if you don't spend it. So
As
if
long
you
as you
do
have
that,
money to cover the bills each year in those 10 years before that money comes due. You
well,
know
the
what I mean? Because that's going to
50,000
tie.
interest. What about the interest? It's spitting out 50,000 of interest every year, and you take that and spend it.
Yeah, but you can't take I didn't think you could take money out of a MYGA or a CD. Like if you have a
Absolutely, you
10-year
can.
MYGA
Yes, you certainly can.
without penalty.
CDs by nature, you're getting taxed anyway,
So
whether
it's
you
not
roll it into
locked
it or
in
not.
for 10 years. I thought it was locked in for 10 years.
So let's talk about a couple of these concerns. That one would be liquidity you're talking about.
Right.
That's a big concern when people buying annuities. So you could buy
Right.
a MYGA, say 10 years. Let's use 10 years because that's a pretty extreme example.
Yeah.
I'm going to lock in 10 years at 5.5%. And we'll just say you have $1 million. I'm not
That'd be
suggesting
great if
people
you could
do that
lock
at
in
all.
5.5%. Yeah, for
You
that period of
can.
time.
I'm looking at the list right now. You can.
Wow.
And this is the question: should you? And the answer is, and I always put a question mark because the viewer, listener, I'm not giving you advice. I'm just telling you what the process is for my clients. These are the conversations I'm having with clients. Should you lock in 10 years at 5.5%, 5.7, whatever it is? And well, the question first is, do I need the money? What kind of liquidity? Typically, these annuities have surrender charges. There's no fee on them. It's not like you're paying a fee every year to keep this. But if you pull your money out before the surrender period, you get hit with a penalty. They call it a surrender penalty. So you're going to want to have an annuity that allows you to take the amount of liquidity you need, whether it's 10% a year or if it's just interest only.
Yeah.
Some people might say, I don't need to touch this at all. I'm just going to put this aside. And they take a small portion of their assets and throw it in there for 10 years. But yes, you can absolutely take interest in a lot of these and live off of it
Without penalty.
without penalty.
Yeah. And
Otherwise, you
so
wouldn't do it.
if yeah, and just so people know, you have to make sure that you're working with a really good trusted financial professional, someone like Dan at Dolphin Financial, because some of these policies, they're all different. Different companies offer different rates and they're competitive. However, if you're going to get a decent rate, like 5.5% at a term for 10 years, some of those companies out there might say you have to leave it all in there for 10 years. Most annuities, though, will let you take up to 10% a year without penalty, like you said. But you want to make sure if you're getting one great feature over here, you're not sacrificing features. Make sure you know the rules, because you have to look at, are there fees? What are the penalties? When do I need the money, and how much liquidity is there? Right? That's really
Right.
important.
And so you build it based on your needs.
Yeah.
So you might say, they might say, I'll give you 5.7 for 10 years. And you'd be like, great, I could put 100,000 in there and I got $5,700 a year coming out. And they're like, well, no, there's a surrender penalty if you take anything out. You can't touch it. All right. Well, forget that company. What about you, company B? I'll offer you 5.5, but that other company's offering me 5.7. I'll give you 5.5, but you're allowed to take the interest out.
Or 10%,
Oh,
or
well,
up to
that
10%.
right,
Yeah.
right, or something. So you have to weigh
Yeah.
all the features, and you
Yeah.
find something you like,
But
and
that
then you want to
said,
spread the risk.
that said, a lot of annuities, like you're talking about, MYGAs will offer something like 5 or 5.5 for 10 years, which is amazing for that length of time, to be able to lock in that, and no fees, and you can pull a certain amount out each year without penalty. That's an ideal situation for some. Again, it depends on your situation. But
Right.
that sounds really good. I mean, it's not necessarily a too good to be true. It's just, I know how competitive these companies are getting, and locking in a higher rate right now might be smart, right?
Well, that's just it. Especially for someone like you, Tony, who's risk averse.
Yeah,
But
I am.
and but if you build it in a strategy where you ladder these things and they come due as you need the money, or you buy these that give you the liquidity you need, you still can't go all in with this because emergencies happen. You
Yeah.
might need, a lot of my clients come to me with an 8,000 dental bill. That sounds crazy, but that happens. And it's like, I got to get a tooth repaired, and where do I go for that? So you don't want to have all your money tied up in these things, but you can be strategic about it. And like I said, what happens is you might be in a situation where, going back to the $1 million, and you might not have a million. It's just, use it as, it's easy math from Tony is really why I'm doing a million.
You're
So
helping me. I was told
you,
there would be no math.
you take, well, keep it at 5%. Now you're getting 50,000 a year in interest
Yep.
on it if you put it all in there. But that's probably not the best strategy. You might say, I'm going to take half of my money,
Right.
500,000, and put it into this and ladder them, and I'm getting $25,000 a year. And then I'm going to take half of my money and put it in the market. And what I'm going to do is spend down the money that's in the annuities over these 10-year period, or 15, or whatever amount of time you go. And then I'm going to let the money in the market ride. So over time, that might give me 8%, but there might be years that I lose 15% and I gain 30. It all is, a guess when it comes to the stock market. But if you use like a fixed bucket to spend down over time, eventually you'll have much more of your assets as a proportion in the market than in safety in the fixed accounts as you get older. So this is
Mhm.
where I'm saying, as you're in your 80s now, and to
Mhm.
your point, well, I don't want to lock it in. You probably are ending your locked in periods, and you have a big chunk of change in the market that you just put in there 10 years ago and you didn't think about. And it's just been steadily going up, right?
Right.
So this is something to consider because it does sound pretty appealing. Give me 5%.
I didn't
Give it to me.
realize I thought to get that much, to get 5 or 5.5 right now, you could only lock it in for a really short period of time. I am personally surprised that there are products out there that would give you 5.5 or 5% over a 10-year period. That is really good. And, I don't know when we would see that again, or anything better. I don't know. I think it would be a long shot to see something better in the next 10 years. So, and
Well, we
if it
just don't
is, it
know.
might be a percentage point, right? I mean, I mean,
Right.
not the
Well,
end of
could
the
it be
world.
10? Could it be 10%? Maybe. But when's the last time we had that? And so now we're talking about inflation, which is the other big concern. Wow, I got inflation to worry about. $50,000 sounds great, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50,000 is not worth as much.
It's
Well,
true.
you have other sources. You have Social Security, which is inflation protected. People can argue with me about that, but there's a cost of living adjustment. But what really happens in practice, Tony, is, and I've seen this with my clients, my parents, everyone I interact with, this is typically, not everyone, but most people, they have their cost of living on their pension or their Social Security or both. And as they get older, they complain about the prices going up for sure, but they just spend less. They spend less on the discretionary stuff because they're not going on those fancy vacations or spending and buying a brand new car every 2 years because they signaling whatever. They slow down. People slow down as they get older and they spend less on the things that they spend more on when they're younger.
Sure.
So yes, the buying power of their investments goes down, but they also spend less. They slow down. It's it's this idea of constantly spending more and more and more forever. I don't see it. But
Right.
to protect against that and to protect against inflation, that's why you have a separate bucket of money for the long term with more aggressive growth
It's a little more
expectations.
risk, but more growth expectation. Yeah.
Yes.
That's why you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I mean, you
Correct.
hear everybody say that and they're like, that's cliche, but it's so true, right?
Right. But you think about pensions of the past, which we don't have anymore.
No.
They're getting their income. They're not worried about the market because they got their income. So you're basically doing the same thing. You're getting 5%. You could buy an annuity that pays out
Yeah.
a 20-year annuity or a lifetime annuity, 10-year
Yeah.
annuity, and it'll take your money and spend it down to zero. But and you can get out a better return, like a better payout of 6-7% maybe. So it depends on your age, of course, but there are ways to use these. And I think what's happening, because these rates are relatively high and are going down now
Mhm.
because interest rates are coming down, I think people are starting to question, well, maybe I should be thinking about this. Maybe it's just not as taboo. A lot of misguided information about these annuities, but really, you give me 5.5% for 5 years, 7 years, 10. Is there anything wrong with that? As long as you do it right, I don't see anything wrong with it. In fact, the other thing that happens, Tony, and this is particularly effective for someone like you're the perfect candidate for this. You're getting closer to retirement age and you're risk averse. You might say the math says I should keep it all in the market, but you won't do it. You mentally won't be able to handle it. Behaviorally, the market goes down, you're going to panic, right? And I'm picking on you, but this is a general, you know, this is something very common for people. If you had a big portion of your money set aside for your income for the next 10 years, could you see yourself not worrying as much about that long-term 15-year bucket in the market
Right.
that's going
Yeah.
whipsawing, right? So
Right.
there's a psychological, a social, a behavioral benefit to locking in a long-term rate. The only downside would be rates skyrocket, and then you say, "Damn, I should have locked in. I shouldn't have locked in so long because now I have regret because of interest rate risk. I could do better now." So think before you sign, but
Right.
consider laddering them. So you're not all in one bucket. You got multiple avenues to exit and try
Yeah.
something new.
And we've talked about laddering before, but if our listeners out there have questions or viewers, they can give you a call or message you through the website, right?
Yeah. And it's a simpler way to plan out retirement spending, because if you go with the dynamic spending, like, okay, if the market's up, I'm going to spend more. If the market's down, I'm going to cut back. We've got some guardrails. It's kind of complex. We did a whole show on rebalancing, and it's like, well, when do you rebalance? It's tough. But if you have fixed buckets, it's a little easier to just visualize, okay, in year 7, this is going to come due. There's my income for the next 2
Mhm.
years in this bucket. So you don't have to wonder, all right, who's going to be president, or what's the market going to do, or whatever. You have it all mapped out, and you always have this long-term growth bucket. Now you may not have enough assets to make all this happen, so you have to tighten or add more in one particular bucket or not. But overall, Tony, I think this is worth looking at. And I think 2025 is going to be the end of the increasing rates, and we're going to start seeing decreasing rates. In 2026, people are going to say, man, I wish I can get 5.5. I have clients that locked in
Yeah.
6%. And at the time, I was like, man, that's a long time to lock in 6%. But in already 6 months later, it's like, man, that's looking pretty good right now,
It's looking really good.
right? So I thought I would bring it up again. I know I talk about these multi-year guarantee annuities. You got to shop around. You got to work with someone that can see them all. Don't just go with one particular company.
Eh,
But there is a risk.
Yeah.
It's not all risk free. You have to worry about that insurance company being around,
And your
and so
personal
you want to.
situation might not warrant
Yeah,
it. You got to have somebody that's
absolutely.
like a Dan Wendell who's going to do the math, and that's huge. But it's creating a MIGA really is like creating your own personal pension, and if you can do that, wow, if it works for you, and you're working with somebody good who can look at all the options, like you're somebody independent like yourself, that's really good.
Yeah, and people go into the bank and say, "What can I get 5%?" They're like, "Yeah, for 2 months." And you're like, "What
Yeah,
if can I get it for 2 years?" And they're like, "No, not anymore." So, uh, but you can. It's not identical to a CD, and there's fees, surrender fees, penalties. So you have to be careful.
Yeah.
But don't think that, the only answer is a CD,
Yeah.
which many people believe in. There are other options. So worth considering, Tony.
Oh, there are surrender
That's what I'm gonna
fees. There are fees. There are penalties with CDs as well if you take the money out
Right.
before the term ends. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
You lose interest or whatever. So that, nothing's without its downside.
Yeah.
But don't be thinking old school annuities are bad, you know, and stocks are the way to go, or stocks are bad. And you have to have a balance.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you got the blinders on and you're missing out.
Yep.
So there you go. So for you, Tony, to conclude, take your 5 million that you have, buy a 10-year CD,
All that
and
radio show co-host money. Got to do
get you
something with it.
250,000 a
Right.
year. You got 250,000 a year in interest, Tony. Just do it. Don't think about it. That should cover half of your expenses
I already
until the
spent
kids
it all on pizza and records. Yeah.
and kids.
Well, that's where it went. Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
All right, Tony. Thanks for a good show. We'll catch everyone next week.
All matters discussed in today's show are for informational purposes only.
This show is not investment advice.
Dan Riddle nor Dolphin Financial Group are affiliated or endorsed by any government agency.
Investment advisory services are offered through Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc., a registered investment advisor in the state of Florida.
Insurance products and services are offered through Dolphin Insurance, Inc.
Dolphin Wealth Management, Inc. and Dolphin Insurance, Inc. are affiliated companies doing businesses as Dolphin Financial Group.
You should talk to someone at Dolphin Financial Group before implementing any of these strategies or ideas.